Our next presenter is Jill Valliere. You might recognize that name, who studied decorative painting at the Rhode Island School of Design and has also studied drawing, painting, and the art of Venetian plaster. She began a full-time career in the decorative arts in 2000, and over the past 12 years has created murals and specialty wall finishes for residences and commercial spaces. Jill is now focusing on creating fine art and shows her work at a Harbor Square Gallery in Rockland. Please welcome Jill.
So I thought I'd start my presentation off with a painting of mine in case anyone here hasn't seen it. This is one of my favorites called The Passage. My hope tonight is, people always ask me, how do I do these paintings, or where did I learn to do them? So I'm hoping to talk about that tonight and tell you about that. But the next slide is going to show you more of an up-close picture. In each painting, I carve and I power sand and I glaze 30 or 50 times in each painting. And this is something that's come over the last 12 years that's kind of built up through many different processes. So I'm going to start here. This is when I was first out of high school, my first real job was as an assistant jewelry designer. And this is really important to me because it was horrible for me. I hated the job, and I'm just a fidgety soul, and I just wanted to get out of there. So 3 years later, much to the horror of my friends and family, I quit and decided to go to Rhode Island School of Design. And here I am 3.5 years after that, holding my degree in decorative painting, which was the best thing I could ever do for myself. After that, I started my business in murals and wall finishes and all sorts of fun stuff. And so this slide, over the years, I took classes and tried to learn some new things. And when I took my first Venetian plaster class, I realized that was so huge because there was so much stuff you could do with plasters and so much fun I had. So this was my first attempt at it, at using washed plasters and stencils to create this kind of wine grotto. Here I was trying out doing impressions in plaster. So I rolled on some plasters and cut out some rubber stamps and pressed them into the plaster while it was wet, caught some glaze into it, so that was kind of fun and exciting. And the next slide that's coming up, I decided to roll some weathered plaster on, and I mixed up some metal waxes and rubbed that on, and then did some metal paints into some stencils. So this began my love affair of plasters and metal paints and experimenting with that. This slide you may recognize from the Beauty Mark Spa in Camden, and this was so exciting because I got to just play with this, again, with these plasters and this time I did an embossed plaster where I actually, the birds that you see there, I did 3-dimensionally with a stencil and plasters, and then I rubbed 4 glazes over that, and then when that was dry, I sanded back the birds to create those edges on them and give them a little bit, highlight them a little bit. And it was a lot of work, but it turned out really beautiful. So then the next slide that's coming up was my first attempt with using metal leaf over metal paints. And at this point, I realized the thing I love about metal leaf is that it just shines, it sparkles, and when the light hits it, it just lights right up. So this is the moment I realized I wanted to use these metals in my work, or metal leaf, gold, bronze, or silver. And so this was a sample board I tried out for a client, and it wasn't going right. And so I decided to try to wipe off this glaze and save the board, and I couldn't. So I set it aside, and my husband, Marcel, who you saw earlier, came home, and he said, "That's a beautiful board." And I realized that is a beautiful board. So I kept it and thought about it. So now I'm going to move on to process. So there's Marcel. He builds my canvases for me because I can't work on regular canvas because it would just tear apart. So he builds these hollow core panels for me so I can really beat them up and abuse the boards and not worry about it. So that's very lovely of him. And so the next step is I mix up all my plasters and tint them. And I try to do a big bucket because these paintings take forever to prepare before I can even put paint on them. And I have to think about what my painting's going to look like. So I tint the plaster to hopefully, so that it's going to work out when I sand through it, that plaster is going to come through. So here's a whole bunch of boards lined up and ready to go. And once they're dry, I hit them with the power sander so there's no points or any areas that seem too heavy, anything like that. I kind of hit them and smooth them out a little bit. But I prep up all these boards again because they take forever, and I like to have a bunch to work from. So here's my studio, which is so much smaller than I want it to be, but I have all these boards on the wall ready to go. They're base painted, ready for the leaf, whatever I'm going to use. And again, I put up a bunch of them because there's so much dry time involved, but I'm also seriously ADHD and I really need some variety. And so this slide here is, again, my studio. And you can see the gold leaf in the background, so they're pretty much ready for paint here. But I also put this up just to show the level of chaos that I'm capable of working in. And I'm sure there's a therapist somewhere that can figure that out. But my dog, Maisie, is always hanging out with me. Here I am again with my power sander, which is my favorite tool to use. I use this a lot, not only for the plaster step, but once I get some glazes on there, I like to hit it with the power sander to kind of break through the color, and so just expose some underlayers, and some of the plaster will come through. And then the next step, once I get to this point in the painting, is to use my Venetian plaster knife. And this is great because I can not only peel through layers of paint to get bigger areas where I can see underneath color, but I can carve in with the side of it to create those branches or whatever I want to do. I can actually create like a dimension to it. This one I put up for two reasons, because I can't show you the glazing steps because I need about 70 slides to do that because there's so many layers of paint on here. But I'm also putting this up because I use photos, I work from photos that I take, and I oftentimes find inspiration just from my property. And this is farther back on our property. The last slide I put up, this is one of my favorite paintings. It's called Ethereal Day, and that is because it was my first really successful attempt at putting together all my ideas and making a painting work. And so here it is. This is my picture from my side yard with a lineup of trees that I love. And if you'd like to see my work, you can see it at Harbor Square Gallery in Rockland. Thank you.